Alright, today we're gonna continue with my stock series. My previous stock video was the 10 a.m. trade. I haven't been able to do it because I'm busy doing other things, so to be able to do it requires commitment, so I haven't been able to do 30 days straight. I typically do longer time frames just because I don't have the time to look at the screen all the time. But I thought today it would be good to look at the most commonly traded options tickers I use from a fresh set of eyes and rechart it and see where it takes us. So we're no bias towards anything. We're just going to start charting it out and try to predict where it's going to go in the future. So we're starting with GLD. So fresh graph, nothing on it. All I have is the 10 period and the 20 period indicators. We're in the weekly time frame right now. So we'll start off big and go small. So what I like to do is start off with time cycles. Essentially, the time cycles are just semicircles. And the end of each semicircle you match with the bottom of historical troughs in the stock. So typically, the ends of the semicircles correlate with troughs in the stock. So here you had a bottom in GLD. Here you had a bottom in GLD, and maybe sometimes that correlates out in the future. So right here you had a bottom in GLD. So typically there's a range in the semicircle where it bottoms out. So we just did that here for the weekly time frame on GLD. Let's put a vertical line where the bottom actually occurred with respect to the semicircle. So this one happened a little bit before the end. And so going out into the future, there's supposed to be a bottom April 1st, 2030. And right, this is where we are out at right now. So GLD had a big peak here. That was back in February of 26. So this is the very large time frame. I think I want to condense it down. So we have the time on the weekly down. Now we need to determine major inflection points. So an inflection point is just where the price stopped at or bottomed at. So here's an inflection point. So you can see this run up in the 2011 period. It stopped right there. It consolidated for 6 or 7 years, and then it hit this inflection point again until it broke out. So this is definitely an inflection point. I would put the recent top in 26 as an inflection point right here. So this is covering the weekly here. And obviously you could have more inflection points, but we're just going to leave it at that for right now. So we're at the weekly time frame. Let's go in the daily and see if we could gather some more information of what's transpired. So we're on the daily now, so now we can just add more inflection points of where the price stopped out at. So here was a major inflection point, bounced and then broke through. This was an inflection point. Here was an inflection point, sorta. Yeah, right there. It bounced here, broke above, hit it. Okay, so now we got daily inflection points. And now I want shorter time cycles. Time cycles work for any period, so they're fractals. So even in the smaller, you got troughs. So let's try to do a smaller time cycle in the troughs. Let's move this down here in the weekly. Let's get time cycles again. So we're just matching the troughs of the lows. So just doing the best we can to match up the troughs. Let's see if this works. So a trough here, a trough here. You got a trough here. This looks like a okay match. So let's bring this circle out of the way. We're looking at this one. All right, now let's do vertical lines at the bottom of the troughs. Let's see, vertical line. So trough right here, and it broke out. And a trough right here. Let's see, going back. Sort of a trough. The time cycles are always phasing it in and out, so they do change the time cycles, but you try to get the time cycles where you're correlated with it at the same time, but they do change phases. So going based on what it's done currently, GLD, we expect the next trough somewhere in this time frame here, so the end of 2026. So essentially the rules for the time cycles are, I can find the right drawing tool here. Let's see here. I just want to draw a polyline. There we go, here, path. So essentially, if the stock goes up for the majority for the first 2/3 of the circle, and then it drops, that's considered positively configured. That means the odds of it going up again on the next semicircle is high. That's positively configured. You also got negatively configured. So negatively configured, the stock actually goes down for the first 2/3 and then it goes up the last third. So the odds of it going down the next semicircle are high. So that's the first basic rule of it. So for example, if we think we did our semicircle troughs correctly, looking at GLD, if we say that it topped out the first half of here, the odds of it going down the rest of the semicircle are high. So looking at this, I would probably be negative biased on GLD for the remainder of the semicircle. So I would be shorting any pop. And that's maybe what I did today on this pop. So that's what I'm seeing there. And we can even go shorter with the time frames here. Let's do 4 hours. So we can actually see it better here, the 4-hour time frame. And you can adjust these as needed. It may be a tad off here, but see, this is actually positively configured because from the start of the semicircle, it went up the first 2/3 of the semicircle, and then it dropped the last third. But then it went up and then it crashed. So the odds are favoring that for the remainder of GLD, it's probably going to touch this inflection point at 317 by the end of the year. That's what my prediction would be on GLD. Okay, so we did GLD. So we got a precious metal. Now we're going to do treasuries, so TLT. It's the inverse of the bond yield. And it's just one of the major tradable options out there. Same thing starting on the weekly. Let's do some time cycles. So you can see clearly here a trough. And this trough sticks out to me. And then we'll see if there's a correlation with before and after. Let's move it down. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation going on here. It is cyclical, so we had a trough here. We had a trough here. We had a trough here. Sometimes it's inversed. So sometimes it does go up the full length of the circle or goes down the full length of the circle. So you see right here, it was positively configured the whole circle until it topped out. It was inverse, so it topped out at the end of the semicircle. It happens. So positively configured. This is actually negatively configured, positively configured. This is negatively configured, so it went up the first third of the semicircle, and then it dropped the remainder 2/3 of the semicircle. And so going out in the future, the next trough is July of 28, so we got about a year and a half. And what's transpired so far? So far it looks negatively configured, because if I get my drawing tool again, it's gone up the first third of the semicircle, and now it's been trending down. So if I were to place my bets, I would be going short on it until at least 2028. Alright, so now we could draw our inflection points where major pivots have occurred. So it looks like a major pivot right here. So pivoted, it bounced off of that. Let's see, we got another pivot right there. Let's see, we got some more pivots right here. And we got the top pivot right here. Alright. Let's make sure to save GLD. So another component is Fibonacci retracements. So how far is it going to go? That's where you need a fib retracement. It has to do with natural numbers that people and the universe gravitates towards, and these natural numbers are on the Fibonacci. So you place the Fibonacci on the troughs and peaks, and then it gives you locations where the next stopping points may be. So for example, I did this major peak right here. You can put them wherever, but so I'm doing this right here. So if I use this as Fibonacci retracements, it shows that 70 is where this may go when the dust settles, possibly TLT. You could also do the Fibonacci on a shorter time frame, so this is probably more appropriate. Doing a Fibonacci where it just recently bottomed and went up. So right here, it's also showing 70. Look at that. So I would put I would take that into consideration, that 70 may be a stopping point. All right, so we're on the weekly. Let's do shorter time frames. Daily, because a week is too long. We could also move the time cycles down here. Let's move that down. Let's do a daily time cycle. So again, the troughs, there's a trough right here. So you could put these troughs wherever. You just got to fill it out and see if it matches. You know, that may be too short of a trough here. Let's do this. This is definitely a trough here, definitely a trough here. So let's put the semicircles right there and see what happens. Okay. Let's see if it matches up. Let's make a vertical line a different color because we're doing the daily time frame. So right here was a trough. Let's make that color yellow. All right. Matches there, not really lining up here, not really lining up. So I would actually scratch that. I would say that's not valid. Do it again. Let's try this one here, a little bit more out. See if that lines up. kind of, sort of. So if we're saying this is a trough, we would put the next trough here towards the end of the year. Sometimes you got to correlate different stocks together. So I think if we go back to GLD, we had a trough towards the end of this year. So there may be some correlation there that they bottom out at the same time. But this one's a little tricky to get the time cycles down, but based on the bigger time frames dominate over the smaller time frames. So I would put more weight into the bigger time cycles. So this bigger time cycle, I put more weight into it, and right now, until proven otherwise, it's showing it's negatively configured, so I'm going to have a negative bias on TLT until July of 28. Okay. TLT, so now we got GLD, so let's do SPY, the S&P 500. Let's see if there's a correlation here. So, I mean, this is the weekly time frame. Obviously, the big one right here is the crash in 2000 and the crash in 09. So, crash in 2000, the crash of 09, the consolidation in 2016, the crash of, more like the correction in 2022, and the next trough is December of 28, which correlates with what we just saw in TLT of 28. So that's the big picture. Let's add some inflection points. Let's see, an inflection point there. Maybe you're just doing tops and bottoms. Inflection point there. Definitely an inflection point right here. The COVID crash. No, excuse me. This was the COVID crash. This was last year. All right. How are the time cycles configured? So the period between 02 and 09 was negatively configured. It was flat, essentially consolidation. 2016 was positively configured, so it went up most of the circle, dropped the last little bit of the circle. That means odds are for the next circle, it's going to go up most of it. Look at that, it's positively configured for most of the circle, dropped the last bottom of the circle, and guess what? It's been positively configured for this circle up to now. So the question is when is this last little bit going to go down until 2028? That is the question. So let's go back to the daily here. Let's do shorter time cycles. So let's move that out of the way. So we're doing shorter time frame here. So what's jumping out at me is this right here. Oh. What's jumping out at me is this right here. Let's see if there's a correlation there. Not really. So we're matching up this trough to this trough, and then this trough possibly, except we had a trough right here. So I don't know if that's a good match. Let's see if we can find a better match. Again, with the semicircles, we're just trying to find the best match of the troughs. So we may need to go out a little bit more. Let's see if this is a better match. This trough to this trough. Okay, this is a better match here. So we had a trough here in 2019. Got a trough right there, trough right here, a trough in 2022. Again, the trough isn't going to perfectly line up, but you want to get it within a small range of the trough. So I would put a better degree of confidence in this trough I just did. You see, it's matching up pretty close right here. Except right here was an anomaly that didn't really match, but everything else is matching up pretty good. So it's showing the next trough here, June 1st of 26. So analyzing the troughs again, this was positively configured to the last little bit here of the crash. This is positively configured. This one was actually negatively configured, but then it went positive again. Positively configured. And this has gone up the whole one to where we are at right now. So as I mentioned before, sometimes it goes up. Normally a change in phasing happens when it goes up the full semicircle or it goes down the full semicircle. So right here, I would say it's gotten up the full semicircle. So I'd be where we're at right now, I'd be questioning what's going to happen in this beginning part of the semicircle. Typically when it goes up or down the full semicircle, so it's topping out at this semicircle, I would have it going down for the full next semicircle. That means it starts going down right now, depending on what it does here. So that's essentially how you do it. And let's add some Fibonacci. You can also go the other way with Fibonacci retracement. So for a quick, short, what it may do now, levels, it would be this most recent drop here in March time frame. So these are the levels right here. So it hit the first Fibonacci level right here. It bounced. And now it's going right here. So it may go to this one right here. It may stall right here. I would wait on this currently. This is not readily apparent as GLD. This is GLD again, where we've determined a negative bias. And also with TLT, we've determined that there's a negative bias here, but for SPY, I would say it's inconclusive at the moment. But based on my experience of watching this shit for 10 plus years, it may put in a top right here and then go down the remainder of the circle, which would be August of 27. So this is a watch right here. We're not going to speculate what happens. Again, going back to the full picture of SPY, these are the 7-year time cycles, so we know that a bottom's going to occur the mid 2029. The question is that when is the last third of the circle going to occur? It may happen at the very end, it may happen now. So we gotta wait and see. All right, let's do one more Q, the Qs. Let's start with a fresh, clean slate, doing the same thing. We'll do the yearly time cycle. So we got the bottom of 02. We got the bottom of the 09 crash. We got the 2016 consolidation. We got the 2022 correction, which was a little out of phase. And then this should be 2029. Okay. So this one's a tad different than SPY, but so I would put a range of the circle, something like between there and there when it's going to bottom out. So very similar to SPY. So the question is this has been very positively configured. So since the crash of 09, pretty much went up the last bit of the circle, dropped it just a tad. Positively configured for this semicircle. Went up most of the semicircle to the last little bit, then it dropped. And the odds are that for the semicircle, the new one is going to go up for most of the circle, and that's what it has done. So we know that it's going to drop the last little bit of the circle here. So the best thing to do, where most people make their money, where I've tried to, unfortunately, guess tops and bottoms, you just ride the trend. You got to ride the trend. So our inflection points are these. Definitely an inflection point right here, inflection point right here, more inflection points right here. Let's move the semicircle down and let's just put one line right here. Okay, so let's look at it from a shorter time frame. All right, we're at the dailies. Wish TradingView would fix this. I don't like how it automatically scales. It's annoying. Again, matching the trough. So what sticks out to me is the trough right here, and we're going to line it up with this trough right here. That's what's displaying to me. Let's see if there's some correlation here. So bottom here, there. Yep, that's matching up pretty good. So right there, a trough. Right here we had a trough. It's not really correlating right here. This may not be the best one, but it's matching right here. There's a trough right there. So I would, given that most recently, the most recent time cycle is the one you want to use. So it's always phasing in and out. You want to catch the time. You want to be in the right time cycle here. So I would use this because it's showing consistencies here. So based on the rules I mentioned, so positively configured, went up for the first 2/3 of the semicircle, dropped the last third. Went up for approximately the first 2/3 of the semicircle, dropped the first third. So odds are that it's going to go up for the first 2/3 of the semicircle and then drop the last third right here. So the next trough due is March of 27. So essentially, this is kind of different than what SPY is showing. The semicircles are a tad different than what SPY is showing. So you got to be biased long. You got to be biased long until proven otherwise. So do a Fibonacci retracement, the most recent low in March, and that gives you your levels. So look at that. So it broke through the first Fibonacci retracement. It bounced off of it. So until proven otherwise, you got to be biased long until it hits the next Fibonacci level, which is up here. So it could oscillate in between this time frame, but I would expect at minimum that it touches this level by some time in the latter part of the first 2/3 of the semicircle, and then a drop into March of 27. So that's essentially how I chart stocks. So you also sometimes got to go with the most apparent, with what's most apparent, the most easiest in-your-face trade. And so right now, as of today, I shorted GLD. I took advantage of this pop right here. It looks negatively configured. You had a big crash back in January, and I see this being negatively configured out until January 27. So I'm going to be, any pop, I'm going to be shorting. TLT, same situation. Based on the longer period time frames, it looks negatively configured until proven otherwise. It may put in a double bottom right here, but given where it is in the circle, I would just be biased short until the 28 time frame. And we'll do one more. We need to get a crypto in here. So this is Bitcoin. This is very cyclical. Very cyclical. So do the troughs. So we got our time down. There we go. Yes. Yes. And our inflection points up here. An inflection point right here, right balance broke. Support. Did a false breakout. Inflection point. So the next trough it's showing is August of 26 in the weekly. Let's put a weekly Fibonacci on it. So I would do this low to this high right here to see. So essentially this is negatively configured. Going back, if it's negatively or positively configured, went up most of the circle, down the latter part, up the first 2/3, down the latter part, went up the first third, but now it's been going down the latter 2/3. So you gotta be biased towards the negative until 26, the end of August 26. So we got about 3 months more of droppage, and where my level would be, I do this most recent little pop right here in the weekly. So showing the level is 28, which is also an inflection point right here, going back all the way to 24 in IBIT, which is a ETF of Bitcoin. So this is pretty obvious to me out of all of them so far of what's going on. So this is the daily. Yeah, this is very obvious. So there's going to be some droppage down to 28. It's at 37, so really it's not that much in the next 2 months. Yeah, we're on the daily time frame. We can even do shorter term time cycles. Let's do a shorter time cycle. Let's see here. Again, we're trying to find the most obvious troughs. I mean, sometimes you can split these larger semicircles into half. So if you just do another semicircle that's half of this one, you can see if sometimes there's a correlation there. So right here and right here. Kind of, sort of. They had a jump there. About right here, kind of, sort of. About right here, not really. Kind of matches. Anyways, you could definitely conclude that for the next 2 months, I need to load up more. I'm going to be shorting more until August of 26. So hopefully this made sense, my lesson of how I do things. I'm redoing it for myself because it always helps if you have a partner, and you don't have a partner, then I'm literally just talking this out to myself, which this definitely helps, talking things out. Hope you enjoyed, and I got more videos coming.